session 2. So I'll share my screen in a second. Here we go. If there are any issues and we end up having to take a break for whatever reason, then I will restart the meeting so that you can rejoin on the same link. Okay. Right. Thank you very much for attending. I'm Wayne Hall. I'm the project manager for the EdTech Demonstrator Schools and Colleges program out of Darlington College. And if you want more information about that, we've got the contact page at the end. And we're supplying support and guidance to a number of schools and colleges across North Yorkshire and North East. I think we're up to about 45, 46 different schools now. So if you need any guidance around BLEs or EdTech support, then please do get in touch. But today, this is the view from the top by the senior leadership team and their perspectives of preparing for remote learning. So I'm very pleased to say that we've got Carol Todd, Mike Chapman and Kate Rowe today. Carol, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Carol Todd. I'm Deputy Principal for Darlington College. I've been here for about 8 years now. And I look after everything from students' first interest in the college right through to their full achievements, really. So, yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Mike?
Hello, my name's Mike Chapman. I'm the Assistant Principal here at the college, responsible for curriculum. Been with the organisation about 12 years now, moving from a lecturer originally through to the role I'm in now.
Thank you. And Kate.
Oh, that's all right, Wayne. Hi, I'm Kate Rowe. I'm Principal and Chief Executive at the college, and I joined the college about 6 years ago. Changed an awful lot in that time, and some of it is, I'm sure, some of the things that we'll probably be talking about this afternoon. So nice to see you all.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the format that we've got is we've got a number of leading questions for the senior leadership team to answer. Somebody's going to lead on those, and then the other two may chip in if they have anything that they want to add. So we're starting with Carol. So Carol, at what point did you start to think about preparing for a possible lockdown?
Yeah, so the momentum for lockdown, as you know, was building through February and probably in early March. So as a senior team, we started to have daily meetings designed to keep all of our people up to speed with a very fast-moving situation. We did all the obvious things at the start, such as displaying posters around COVID in education and promoting the careful washing of hands. As the situation started to gather pace, we would have discussions daily, and decisions were being made on a whole range of practical things. Some were very basic. So we had things like, purchasing an inordinate amount of sanitizer before stocks were running out, and making sure that the sign on the front door would tell people that the college was not open to the general public. But we also were talking about sort of business continuity things, such as, could we get hold of any more mobile phones for our staff so that they could work from home? And how did you divert the office landline phone to the mobile phone? And, could we pull back all of our stocks of Chromebooks that were squirreled away in the various curriculum departments in the library so that we could reallocate them to staff and students to continue to work from home? I distinctly remember short development sessions on the use of Google Meet and Teams, which was quite novel at the time, but then soon became second nature to us all. And even things like considering making the building safe, making sure that we had an organised rota of on-site staff to keep things ticking over. But we also deliberated at length the more strategic things like the longer term impact and what that might mean for the college's financial stability. Having achieved, a decent financial position through a lot of hard work over the last couple of years, we had agreed prior to COVID where we wanted to invest in the college. But unfortunately, our wish list, as we called it, was something that had to be put on hold for the time being. There was just too much uncertainty. So there was an awful lot of planning, as you can tell by that, going on constantly. The daily meetings turned into full day sessions through March, and really they were essential. We crammed as much planning as possible into those days. We permanently took over the boardrooms in our college as our command centre, with lots of flip chart paper, blue tack, and an email station for rapid communications to managers and staff. And from there, we were able to schedule the tasks to be completed. And then as we did them, we were able to tick them off one by one. So really, by the time we got to the 23rd of March, we had ticked off quite a lot of our list. And I think we were as prepared as we possibly could hope to be under the circumstances for that impending lockdown. The majority of staff in the end were able to work from home. Some were given Chromebooks and phones to do so. Some used their own devices. No student was turned away in relation to having assistance via a Chromebook, and indeed some were issued with a 3-month internet access as well, where they didn't have broadband access at home. So after the 23rd of March, we continued with the daily sessions online, working from our kitchen tables, etc., to make sure we tracked every thought process around how to keep the college operational during that period. And I think just to sum up then, I would say going through that process, we could never consider it was a success as such, because it's not something that we'd wanted or planned for prior to COVID coming around. But the key to making it work for me, as we did, was inevitably it was the planning and that methodical approach really to what we were doing, and making sure that we thought about every scenario we possibly could.
Thank you. Mike, you'll have been quite heavily involved in that procedure in your position. How did you find that?
Yeah, it was challenging, certainly. Lots of decisions to be made, fast-moving environment, guidance is changing, the position was changing on a daily basis, so it was tricky. I think one of the key successes, was our ability to actually get IT out to where it needed to be, and effectively switch from one day to the next, from classroom-based learning to online learning, and our learners saw very little downtime, if any downtime in most cases, to their provision, and tutors were able to continue to keep learners engaged, which I think helped enormously. I've heard other stories of where it's taken a few days or weeks to get things up and running online, and actually it's very difficult to then re-engage with the learners. So being able to just flip the switch, as it were, with all the hard work that had gone into that, I think was crucial really to the success of keeping our students engaged and continuing with their learning.
Yeah, thank you very much. I like the flicking of the switch, because I think there was very much of that at the time, was it? It was a very sharp turn. Back to Carol again. So what skills and knowledge did you have across the college that you were able to call upon? So what was already there? What sort of foundation did the college have?
Yeah, well, we had good foundations, I think. I mean, no one was prepared for COVID, let's face it. Before last Christmas, had anyone ever contemplated such a scenario? I don't think so. But still, we did have a good vision and foresight to invest in IT infrastructure. So our strategic aim has always been to be, if we can be, at the forefront of technology within an educational setting. And for this, we did have, thankfully, the backing of our board. Our forward-thinking IT manager, and I've got to say, our curriculum IT advocate, Wayne, who is here facilitating for us today, continued to push the boundaries for us in terms of infrastructure and resources. So we were early adopters of the new technology, one of the first colleges in the country actually to adopt the Office 365, and a very early adopter of Google Classroom as our virtual learning environment. So for us, the switch to Google Classroom as our VLE a few years ago was a no-brainer, because our students, when we tried it and sort of piloted, they loved it and they found it very intuitive. So we switched across to that Google Classroom from an early stage, and that made such a difference. Now we're actually a Google for Education reference college, I won't go into the details of that, but Wayne could add some detail if he wishes to on that. Over the past few years then, our practitioners have become increasingly experienced in developing their teaching approaches to using technology in the classroom. In fact, that was actually recognised in our last inspection report from 2016. And to give a little bit of an example of that, even before COVID became a word of our language, we were running online shorthand classes to journalists from around the country via our online video conferencing. So to some extent, we had dipped our toe in the water a little bit. We've always continued to build on the use of Google Classroom, our virtual learning environment, as our main tool, because that supports the interactions between teachers and students. And as I said before, students actually love to use it. Many of them travelling home on their bus journey from college will pick up their work from their teacher and continue to work on it whilst they're on their bus journey home. So it's great for them. They do love it. So when the lockdown approached, it was the obvious next step for all our teachers to move into using the Google Meet facility, which is the online meeting forum. So some quick guides were produced and everyone took a little bit of development and practice. And then sure enough, as Mike's already said, from the 23rd of March onwards, we were up and running with Google Meet as our main remote online video conferencing forum. And students and staff took to it very well, really, in the main. We had some excellent and innovative practice taking place. And just an example of that, we had some fabulous online journals which was actually a great tool for engagement. And it also helped the staff to monitor the well-being, engage the mood of the students who were coping with the lockdown situation. It allowed us to open up discussion points and also improved their English. So those online journals really proved very useful. Our staff coaches are our true advocates for the power and potential of technology. And they were quick to lend a hand. Wayne, particularly here today, one of our true advocates of IT in education. And so we had plenty of advice and guidance to give out to the staff around how to get the most out of it for the benefit of the students. So overall, I think we did take what we'd developed, we took the skills that we'd learned already, and then we just moved it on a step when we had to through the lockdown situation.
Thank you very much. Kate, how did that look to you from your position?
Well, I think Carol's pretty covered it really, but I would say from my point of view, what was really key is that a couple of years ago, we made some really big strategic decisions about the direction we wanted to go in. And we moved to choose Google Classroom as our VLE, and that's been a really important decision, but also to VMware Horizon View, which gives all of our staff remote access to everything that they need, all of the sort of systems at the college, so that they were able to move to working from home really seamlessly when the day for lockdown actually came. I'd like to say we saw in our crystal ball that COVID was coming, but of course we didn't. But of course we did see strategically that everyone is going to move to a point where this style of blended learning is going to be much more common. And that actually as a college, we recognised we were behind the curve at that point, and we made that investment in order to get ourselves ahead of the curve again. And I think that's the step change that you need to make. So with glorious hindsight, we made absolutely the right decisions. They were a bit of a leap of faith at the time though, but they have been really important ones.
Yeah, I think what you've both said there was very important, that we do have a good solid foundation with our IT infrastructure within the college, so we were very quickly able to transition to off-site teaching, weren't we? And that enabled that. So that investment was really paid dividends, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. We couldn't have done it. We would not have been able to go online and virtual and remote in the way that we did overnight without having made that investment in the past. It would have been incredibly difficult.
Thank you. Question 3. So this is last of Carol's focused questions. Over the lockdown period, what went less well, or what had you possibly taken for granted? So what came out the woodwork that you hadn't really been anticipating?
Okay, so just before I do, I just want to acknowledge again what did go well. So, the engagement in teaching and learning was actually quite impressive from March onwards. And we moved so quickly from 100% face-to-face college-based delivery to online remote delivery by the end of March. And I think, to be fair, I think that was a massive achievement. And I'm sure all the other colleges will say the same. I think the whole sector really stepped up its game. It went well, as we've said, because we were already avid users of our virtual learning environment, Google Classroom, and the staff and students were very familiar with that, albeit they predominantly used it in a classroom setting. So it was just taking away the classroom, the physical classroom, but the rest of the practice was very similar. So the transfer to remote online was possible because we developed the IT strategy, as we've already said. But we had things like, at our disposal, we had things like the ability to replicate our Office PC desktop on a mobile device, such as a laptop or a Chromebook. So that was whether we were in the college or not. So that gave us access to all of our network folders and drives and all of our bespoke software, such as the HR systems, etc. But we'd also invested in mobile devices, particularly Chromebooks, instead of that preference to replace desktop PCs, which we get every year, you know, the request to replace PCs. Instead, we decided to go more down the Chromebook route. So our mobile Chromebook trolleys, we had them dotted all around the curriculum in the college, and we were able to sort of bring those back out and collate those into a central resource house quickly, which then enabled us to see where the gaps were and where we needed to plug those gaps by providing the Chromebooks. But we'd also started to use Google Classroom as a repository for our meetings. This is something that Wayne particularly promoted through in advance of COVID. So we were attending the meeting in person, but all of our documentation was online, all of our agenda minutes, papers, etc. were online. So again, we were almost just a step away, and all we needed to do was move to online meetings. And obviously the documentation was already online. So again, things that went very, very well. So now I'm getting to your question, Wayne. What did go so well, or what did we take for granted? And I'm kind of picking up on the last part of that question, really. So we had made an assumption probably that the majority of young people of 16, 18 years were of the digital era and therefore had good digital skills. What we found, whilst they were good at social media, it turned out that they were less proficient than others, somewhat less proficient than others, when it came to working digitally for their course. So this was on top of the fact that some students also didn't have access to IT devices or indeed their broadband. That part of it, with the access to devices and broadband, we did try to solve. So we did hand out our Chromebooks, and we did also arrange 3-month internet access contracts for students where they didn't have the broadband. But really, it was the level and the variety of skill in digital skills across our broad range of students that took us a bit by surprise. There wasn't that sort of standard level coming out of the school at 16 that we maybe thought should have been there. So there was a definite gap. Some of them extremely proficient and just some that weren't. We hadn't thought about that as a stumbling block. So one of the things we've determined to take forward is to make sure that any new students to the college are adequately equipped with the basic digital skills at the very, very start of their course. So we have actually tasked our curriculum managers to incorporate basic digital skills within each curriculum area in the September term, just to give the youngsters the confidence, should it be needed, to work remotely from home, just in case anything happens in the future. So that was the key one for me that we took for granted.
And do you think it is confidence that they lack?
Confidence, yes. And I'm not sure exactly how much actual skill development some of the students have done through their time at school. Perhaps some have missed out on some educational aspect of that, and they're coming with that sort of deficient skill level. Mm-hmm. So skill level and confidence to some. Yeah. On top of the issues of access and internet, etc.
I think we assume that because a lot of students are consumers of
Yes.
digital things, we assume that they can produce that as well, and in some cases that's not the case, is it? Do you think you would agree with that, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. That certainly seemed to be the case from what we've got. Definitely a mixed picture. Certainly, one of the other things we did spot though was some of our lower level learners that actually were very difficult to engage in the classroom. Particularly some of the learners that were on the course. We have a course which is entirely designed to kind of re-engage learners and reinvigorate them, to help them decide what they want to do moving forward and progress them into a kind of a curriculum area. Some of the learners on that programme that were really tricky to engage in the classroom actually engaged incredibly well online and achieved huge amounts through that process. So we've seen some real positives from it as well. That way of working. Which has been eye-opening and good.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we're moving into Mike's specialist chosen subjects now. So this is so think about how did you support your learners and your staff emotionally, because obviously there's a lot of change going on. There's I know we talk about support bubbles now, but we were breaking out of those bubbles at the beginning of the pandemic. How did you support your staff and learners?
So taking those two things sort of separately, then, I mean, in terms of students, in terms of our learners, I mean, the overarching theme was probably we didn't do a huge amount differently. We just applied it differently. So rather than lots of face-to-face support and interactions, it was a lot more online and telephone support and interactions. So to give a kind of a flavour of what we have in place at the college, we've got an excellent sort of student support network and function within the college. So that's a range of different things, from progression coaches within curriculum areas that are kind of the personal tutor, if you like, for some of the learners that support them with any issues that they've got, and issues with whether that be in their personal lives or whether that be with the work that they're doing in class, all of those kind of things that are barriers to them achieving. Student support advisors that are a dedicated team to kind of support with more sort of detailed issues and work with students on a one-to-one basis. The programme leaders, we've got counselling services in the college, the safeguarding team. So all of those functions from moving from college to at home all continue to operate as normal, if you like, in terms of their communication with learners. It just was that it was happening online or it was happening via the telephone. What we actually found in terms of the counselling, what we actually found is learners that had been speaking with our counsellor for a while actually opened up a lot more through the telephone than they did face-to-face. They found that it was easier which was really interesting, actually, and something for us to probably consider for the future. We did a lot around communication with learners as well, so making sure that they knew through their programme teams and through kind of general college messages that they knew what was going on, they knew what was happening, they knew what the direction of travel was, so they weren't kind of in the dark and feeling anxious about what was happening with their programme. They had regular communication from the college at all times. And things like our high needs learners were all supported by familiar staff, so staff that had worked with them throughout the year up to that point, and very well trained staff as well. So there really wasn't anywhere for learners to drop through a gap and for learners to hit those issues, because all of that support was in place and it remained in place throughout the period. And in terms of staff, similar in a sense, we've got a really good line management team within the college. So that's a very people-focused set of individuals that look after the members of their teams. Very supportive, very understanding of individual circumstances, and I think that's probably been one of the biggest challenges on a staff level, has been difficulties that every individual will have when you tell them they're going to do their job, but they're going to do it from home. They've got young children, they've got family members that they're looking after, or whatever it might be. So everyone's got those pressures at home. So having an understanding and supportive network of managers, I think, helped enormously to kind of alleviate any of those issues early doors, as opposed to them festering away. But on top of that, the HR team was always available through telephone, through Google Meet as well. So there was always that additional level that staff could get to, occupational health, etc. And we had lots of regular cross-college meetings as well. So from a curriculum point of view, we met every week with our curriculum management team. and we were able to discuss and iron out any issues that were cropping up from a delivery point of view, any trends that we were seeing with learners, that kind of thing. We were able to discuss those quickly and put action in place. And I think sort of finally one of the things that I think proved to be incredibly important actually throughout the period was the staff Q&A sessions that we did online, or rather that Kate and Carol predominantly did online. In the Google Meet, we invited all the staff to attend, and we got really good attendance to those. Lots of questions asked, lots of questions answered. Some of those sessions were really long, but it was an opportunity for the staff to ask the questions that they had, get immediate answers to those questions, and also I think it's quite important to be able to gauge the mood in the executive team, gauge the mood and the direction of travel. And I think that appearance and being able to actually speak sort of face to face, if you like, through the computer screen helps a lot to understand the position that we're in and the mood and the feel of the organisation, which I think was really important. I think very well received from all the staff that attended those sessions.
Yeah. I think from a staff point of view, I think what also helped was we used Google Chat and WhatsApp groups quite informally, so we were able to, we didn't feel as if we were separated from anything, so that helped. Kate, would you like to add anything there? I know you led very heavily on the QA sessions.
Yeah, I think as Mike said, I think they were really important, and we knew they would be, but even so, I think the kind of the sort of wave of emotion that came back from staff saying these are really important, they're helping us feel connected back to the college, we felt a bit isolated at home, you know, this is making us feel emotionally part of the college again, was really important through lockdown. And you know, this kind of session is all about technology, but actually it's all about people as well in terms of how you work. So those things were very important. We're a relatively small college in a relatively small town, and the sense of community is really important to us. So that worked very well. But the informality of it was very helpful. We used all the chat, and people were able to ask questions directly, and we kind of answered everything sort of straight away. But I think, as Wayne's highlighted, using lots of these things informally and being prepared to accept that, you know, people are using these kinds of things informally was just also important in terms of keeping staff morale through the anxieties that everyone had, and just keeping people really connected to the college, so that when they came back, you know, that felt like a really positive experience as well. Thank
you. Mike, as a college, what were the top priorities concerning getting staff and students back?
I guess there's sort of two headlines. The first one, and probably the most important one, was health and safety. Was making sure that we could operate in college in some capacity that was safe and kept everybody as safe as we could. And the second being obviously the quality of education. First and foremost, we're here to support learners to achieve qualifications, get the best grades that they can, and progress. So that's obviously got to be a priority for us as well. I mean, in terms of health and safety, as I imagine colleagues in the meet would have similar sort of stories. There was huge lists of things that we did and we looked at, from kind of clear rules on what was and wasn't allowed on site, signage to support that, one-way systems around the building, the decisions around masks. We looked at occupancy rather of the building in huge detail. So we obviously had this concept that we need to reduce the volume of people, the volume of traffic in the building on a daily basis. But what does that look like? What does that look like in the past? How do we reduce that? What sort of different things can we do around that? So we did a reasonable amount of modelling on that as well, and came up with a figure of kind of 50-60% of what usually the volume of learners that would usually be on the building on any one day, and trying to get to that level for sort of bringing people back in September. We did things around lunch times as well. One of the kind of a lot of the timetables in college previously have worked around not a completely set model, but they've worked a lot around maths and English timetables. So what we would have at lunchtime is a flood of learners from lots of different areas, all reaching our central point, reaching the refectory and things like that around the same time. We'd have a big volume of people, which we obviously knew we needed to avoid. So we took a very early decision to split the different departments down into slots. So every department got a half-an-hour slot. learners would come, collect their lunch, and then head back to their classrooms to actually eat. So we developed this grab and go concept, or rather, probably I guess it's called the grab and go concept from various retailers, and put that in place. The knock-on of that, obviously, was then we've got learners in classrooms eating lunch, so we needed to put together a supervision model for that. So we've roped in staff across the building to make sure that there's some supervision present on all the corridors during those lunch periods as well. Lots of risk assessments in place, and very much a working document that are changing and will continue to change, I'm sure, as guidance is amended over the course of time. Bringing in additional cleaning, so we brought in a group of additional cleaners that are basically just rotating the building, cleaning down all of the kind of touch points in the building, handrails, door handles, etc. All of that side of things. And that concept of bubbling, so we made the decision to bubble by department, and trying to kind of minimise the contact between those different bubbles through the various things that I've talked through. In terms of the kind of quality of education side of things, it was around firstly planning to deliver online, or to be able to deliver online. So if we needed to switch to online delivery, that the resources we've developed in an adaptable way, so it could just be switched to an online delivery. A lot of work around timetabling. In terms of Darlington, now we're located on the kind of the edge of a couple of different local authorities. So we have learners that travel upwards of an hour in some cases to get to the college on the daytime, on a bus that comes for 9 o'clock and then leaves after 5 o'clock. So we did a lot of work around making sure that when learners were in college, they were in for as full a day as possible, and then when they were learning at home, they were learning for whole days at home, so that they weren't bitty and we didn't have issues with travel and transport links and that kind of thing. So we did a lot of work around that, and that was extremely difficult. Our curriculum managers, timetabling at any time is really difficult, but to add all of those levels of complexity made it a really tricky task. And then just keeping that student-centered approach, just making sure that our learning was, our delivery was individualised, learners got the support that they needed, and ensuring that they weren't feeling isolated in any way, and had access to all of the resources and things that they need. So that idea of digital skills and development of that side of things that we've touched on already is going to be really important, in making sure that we know where we've got gaps in terms of IT access, to make sure that learners can access their class, and should we need to go online again at any point.
Thank you. Carol, can you expand on that a little bit, and maybe explore the masks and what decision we took around masks and the like?
Okay, so we've had a decision in the college to encourage and support the use of masks, the wearing of face coverings, should I say, in all of our communal areas of the college. So we introduced that on the 1st of September. So there was a week before our term started. Thankfully, our term started on the 7th of September. I don't know why in our curriculum planning last November we decided on the 7th as our start date, because normally we would have started the week earlier, but there was something about our planning and we obviously put that in place, and thank goodness we did, because it gave us that extra few days just to make sure that everything was fine. So term started on the 7th. From the 1st of September, a wearing of face coverings, promoted and encouraged. I would say though at the moment we have that under review, and as an executive team we are constantly thinking about that and whether we need to make that mandatory as opposed to encouraged and promoted. And it is something that we'll be coming back to this week to decide how we take that forward. But so far we've had a very good response from both students and staff, and you know, people are taking it with the best of respect and actually, you know, adopting the mask wearing. So it's not been an issue for us overall. I was just going to come back on a couple of points as well, Wayne, on that question. For me, one of the top priorities was handling the staff anxieties at every stage of the process. So every little small step we took, it required quite a lot of patience, and staff needed to be able to voice their anxieties, and we needed to listen and then respond to them. So we did have the question and answer forums, as we said, which were running sort of every few days or week at the outside. But we would be covering things again and again and again, just really to reassure staff and make sure that they felt comfortable with the next stage. So every time, there was something slightly different, it was about taking the staff with us and making sure that they were happy with the changes that we were putting in place. And then the other thing as well about students, getting students back to site, was consideration of the transport arrangements. And that obviously is not something that's fully solved at this stage yet. But we did get a small pot of money, shall I say, from our devolved authority, which we are looking to use to provide some flexible arrangements for some of our students on the periphery of our catchment area. So lots of, thought and planning into how we can help students in terms of their transport arrangements as well.
Thank you very much. Mike, what would a learner studying at Darlington College experience now, and how did you achieve it? So what's the different, what experience would they get now, and how does it differ from it would have been a year ago?
Yeah, it's, I mean, in terms of classroom delivery, once they're in a classroom, obviously, layouts of rooms and things are very different. And it's trickier to move around the classroom and that kind of thing. So that interactivity is different now, but there's still essentially high quality lessons being delivered by excellent tutors with good resources, whether that be in class or whether it be online. It's about our staff having to now, our tutors having to adapt their delivery styles and methods to make their classes more interactive in the new kind of way that we're working. So whether that be through digital means or whether it be through kind of bits of paper and pens and whiteboard markers, it's about developing those things so that learners can engage still with their studies, and that's something that we're already very good at, but we'll need to continue to develop, particularly thinking about the digital side of things and making sure that our sessions online develop further and we use the resources at our disposal to the best of their means. The social experience in college is absolutely very different. We've got no social spaces open indoors in the college. Limited opportunity for students to mix outside of their class groups because the bubble by department. And that's really tricky because as a 16, 17, 18-year-old into college, you want to be able to interact with all your friends and hang out and use those social spaces and have some of that downtime. So it's really difficult to put that on learners, but essential really as well in terms of stopping the spread. So as I said already, touched on in other questions, lunchtimes are predominantly being taken in classes, so learners are coming and collecting their lunch and then heading back to the rooms that they've been taught in. The layout of those classrooms are very different. But students are really being really well supported by their programme leaders, by their progression coaches, by our student support team and services. So there's lots of support there and lots of opportunities to access that support. So learners in that respect should be really well supported and aware of all of that. Regular tutorials happening in terms of welfare checks on learners and making sure that they're doing okay. Things that we're still working through, and we've touched on already, is that access to IT for learning to take place outside of college and working through that and understanding where the priorities are on that front. And as much as we put all of these things in place, all of these restrictions and guidelines and things in place, we do also recognise that there's some learners, those with potentially high needs or social anxieties, etc., that do still require the opportunity to be able to escape, if you like, from their programme group and go and take some time out and find some space to just chill out and collect themselves. So we, that sort of side of things is in place as well and very well understood by the staff. In terms of how did we achieve it, probably very slowly, I think, in terms of it's taken an awful long time and an awful lot of planning and thought over the lockdown period and over the summer period to put all these things in place. And as everyone's well aware, the guidance has changed multiple times. So there's been lots of shifting and moving and adapting as we've been hit with new pieces of guidelines. Things though that have helped us enormously, such as the EdTech demonstrator that you'll all be aware of. That's been really important in terms of giving us that added extra from a digital skills point of view. We were successful recently with a collection of other colleges on a CCF bid as well, so we'll be able to bring extra resource into the college to support that digital skills rollout further as well. And it's just going to be a continuing adjustment, I think, and we'll continue to change things over the course of this year and perhaps beyond. We'll see how it develops really. But we've started the year really well. The experience of learners, I think, has been very positive. The learners have approached it with a really excellent attitude as well. They've really kind of got on board. It's that community feeling. Everybody is in this together, and we've all got to make the best of it and do the best we can to support each other to get where we all want to be. So that's been really positive, really heartening to see everybody come back with that approach and that attitude. Yeah, I think that's probably it from myself, Wayne.
Yeah, the students that I've been teaching this week, they're definitely excited to be back in college, and also they're enjoying the mix of learning at home and learning in college. So I think that is working really well, and I think they are. I think they're growing into that experience and maturing quite a lot into work-ready learners.
Yeah. It's exciting and it's new and it's dynamic and it's we can make it work, and we are making it work really well from my perspective.
Thank you, Kate. How do you think we're making it work?
Well, I think in terms of at its best, what a learner I think now gets at Darlington College is that they get a study of programme that's really that's been planned in a joined up way between the online and the face-to-face delivery, so that the online isn't a bit of a bolt on or a bit of, we need to replace that with something else. It's actually been planned as a blended learning experience, and the experience of what we learned during lockdown has obviously helped everyone sort of do that for now, and that's what you get at its best. And they see a teacher who's very confident at using this kind of technology and working interactively with the class, and that gives the students, I think, a lot of confidence. But also using Google Classroom, I think, where a tutor has set up a really good classroom, Google Classroom, for their students, they can really see the sense of the course ahead. I remember being in a student liaison committee. We have a committee where students talk to governors about their experience at college, and a group of beauty students said the best thing they felt was that they really liked Google Classroom because they could see the resources that their tutor had put into that classroom, the things that they were going to move on to do, the units and modules that they had coming up. And they weren't at them yet, and they knew that, but they knew they were there, and they knew that their tutor had really planned and prepared their full year of study. And they said that gave them a lot of confidence, and that really impressed them that their tutor had kind of done all of that, and that level of preparation had gone into their programme of study for the year. So I think that at its best, that's what they get now.
Thank you very much. So sticking with Kate, what long-term changes do you see as opportunities for the college? So we're thinking strategic now.
Okay, so I think we do see that some of the changes that have happened opportunistically as a result of lockdown are going to be things that we carry on with. So certainly there will be more blended learning. There will be more really high quality online experiences for students going forward. When we have a vaccine and everything is kind of supposedly back to normal, I think a lot of that will still continue. So I think colleges really need to, as a sector, we need to get our act together and really try and take the lead in that, to make sure that the kind of resources and the content are there, and that they're high quality, and that they work for us. We're going to have to do that in partnership. That was a big part of the College Collaborative Fund bid that Mike mentioned earlier, that we do that. And that these resources, at the moment, we're using them in the lessons that we've got, but over time that there'll be more available outside that as well, so that they're actually more accessible for students to to add to what they get in terms of their guided learning hours, for example, so that's a kind of opportunity for them. There are more flexible opportunities for learning out of this as well, whether it's for employers or for people in work, or for the kind of students who do engage better at home or who can't come into college for whatever reason. We can do a much better job, I think, with some of those learners in future. We can do CPD for our staff in different ways. I do think that we've got a lot of our back office staff, particularly, not necessarily working physically in college, but rotated, working from home. And like many organisations who've done this for COVID, we found that actually productivity doesn't need to decrease, and that actually this can work. And these are things that are likely to continue more in future. And again, at its best, you can tap into a lot of originality and kind of creativity that the students and their tutors can have. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I've seen. My favourite is still the TikTok video that our performing arts students and their tutor put together with the kind of makeup sessions. I can't even describe it in words. You've got to kind of see it, but it was fabulous, and that's something those students can take away with them as a big part of their kind of portfolio. But I do think that our staff, this doesn't happen overnight, and our staff do need are going to need support over the long term to kind of develop all the things that we need to develop in this way. We've, as a profession, education has got the benefit of kind of generations of learning and best practice about what works with classroom teaching, but we're all relatively in baby steps in terms of kind of the future development of online learning. So it won't happen overnight, and we've got to think about how we seriously develop our staff to take these opportunities.
Thank you very much. Mike, would you like to add anything in there? I mean, Kate's mentioned there about the possibility of tapping into new markets and possible efficiencies around working from home. Would you like to expand on any of those?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's absolutely some opportunities for us, particularly around the kind of higher level delivery, some of the professional qualifications, that sort of side of things that we do, to expand our market further than the kind of the area that we currently cover. A lot of the learners on those types of programs have really enjoyed being able to access the courses online as opposed to coming into college. In most cases, they're working 9 to 5 or what have you, and then coming into college, they've got young families, etc. So to be able to just log onto the computer and access the learning and get the same out of it is excellent. So I think it's something that we'll certainly be exploring in the not too distant future to expand that out. And also some of that, as I spoke about earlier, some of that access to some of the support functions and where learners have actually have engaged much better and been more open through the telephone or through the online systems. I think that's something for us to explore for the future too, an opportunity to get better support in place for learners if that works for some of the cohort.
Wayne?
Yes?
Can I add as well?
Of course you can.
I was going to say something I think that we'd like to probably take forward was that the communications, that online sort of briefings, Q&As that worked so very, very well. So something like that I think would be really good for us to sort of see as an opportunity for the college and take that on and really develop our communication strategy a bit further around that. But there's another one as well that's very pertinent because we've been part of some observation training today. So I think there's potential changes to the observation process that we have in the college as well. Being able to observe online sessions rather than classroom-based sessions enables us to be less intrusive. And sometimes when you're a physical presence in a classroom, you can make such a difference to the sort of the way the group works and the way they interact with the teacher. But obviously having that ability to do an online observation, I think, is something that again could be a huge opportunity for us. So we're talking about how we can develop that further at the moment as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the Hawthorne effect, isn't it, about people being watched? And
yes,
absolutely. Thank you very much. And we're at our penultimate question now. And again, back to Kate. What long-term changes do you see as threats for the college? So we've looked at the positives and what we might do. What can you see in the horizon that we need to take into account?
Well, I think you can't do everything online. That's just so obvious. We're a vocational college. You can't. There's a lot of practical sessions and subjects that are really difficult to kind of take online, and you can't get away from that. I mean, not all online is the same, and I think that we have to make sure that the quality of what we're doing in this digital space is kind of really important. I think colleges need to try and make sure they're seen as at the forefront of this. There are a lot of other providers of things like distance learning, for example, who would say that they're kind of leaders, and I would like to see colleges absolutely being seen as the leaders in this, because I think we have, we can do that, and we have the ability to do that. But if we don't, then our market in future could potentially diminish as online delivery grows.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, I'm not to repeat stuff, but digital exclusion is just a real issue. And again, as a sector, as the FE sector, I think we've got to really keep banging the drum to government and others about the need for this to be tackled. If I had to lock down the college tomorrow, I just know how many learners would not have good access to technology that we've got to support. And I think one of the difficulties, and it's kind of referred to in the chat with the question about how do you track learner engagement with online learning, because that is kind of one of the challenges, and the threat there is if you can't evidence it, then you might not get paid for it. So clearly that's a kind of key issue. Mm-hmm. Our approach this year is it's timetabled sessions, so it's got registers and everything else that kind of will evidence it. But there's a lot of other engagement with online learning that may go on outside the classroom, and that is going to be harder to track. I wouldn't say we've necessarily cracked how we track some of that engagement that's kind of outside the timetable. But I think we're going to need to find ways of doing that. If anyone's cracked that, let me know, because I'd like to know that as well. There you go, Wayne.
Thank you. Carol, would you like to add anything?
I think Kate summed up the key threats, I would say, but I was just going to add a little bit, because we talked about that digital exclusion, and it's the broadband as well. It's the actual infrastructure of the country, isn't it, in terms of having the broadband ability in certain rural areas. Our colleges it's sort of on the crossroads of County Durham, Darlington, North Yorkshire, and some of our areas in North Yorkshire are particularly rural, as are in Durham as well, up the Dales, etc. And if you haven't got broadband available to you in the village you live in, then how on earth do you pick up online learning? So there's those sorts of issues as well that we need to think about as potential threats, which would impact on the quality of the education. And the other thing around that as well is the space to learn, an appropriate space to learn. Some of our students live in family abodes where they've maybe got many siblings and other people vying for space and the digital equipment, and how to get that proper setup where you're actually in a position where it's a good place to sit and actually learn. Sometimes very difficult. So those are things that would definitely impact on the quality of education, and that is a threat that we need to be aware of.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we do have a member of staff who lives out in the Dales, and she can only get good reception. She doesn't actually have Wi-Fi at the house, so she has to climb up a hill to get good reception on her telephone, or she has to go into the village to use their coffee shop before she can actually get online. So it is a real problem. Yeah. So this is our last question now, and this is about 3 pieces of advice that you would pass to others in your positions. So can we start with Carol?
Oh, my 3 then would be, I would say, plan to build your IT infrastructure so that you can continue to work remotely if the worst happens, because I think that plan and building of that infrastructure over time is really important. Develop the skills of your staff, because they need to keep pace with the change of technology. Don't let them fall behind. And then I think if the worst does happen, and it does, things do go as they did with COVID and we end up in another lockdown, I think it's just devoting the time and the people to think through the possible scenarios and put all of those thoughts on paper, and then methodically go through and tick off as we go. So it's that approach to planning and sort of making sure that we've covered every aspect that we possibly can. You're never going to be able to plan for everything. It's impossible. But if you've thought through as many scenarios as you can. So those would be my 3 pieces of advice.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Carol. Mike?
So digital strategy, absolutely really important to have that nailed down and working towards it. My other couple would probably be making sure that there's good support in place for staff and students, whether that be kind of the emotional support, the well-being side of things, or whether it be support with the digital aspects, developing the skills needed for the classroom, etc. Really important. And communication. Really good communication, clear, effective messages to staff and to students and parents, so that everybody understands what the situation is and how it's being progressed and moving forward.
Thank you. And finally, Kate, your 3 pieces of advice.
Thank you for giving me a bit of time to think about it, Wayne. So I think certainly strategically, I would say, well, first thing would be to be bold and be a bit ruthless as well. So I think if your analysis says you need a new system, go for it. We did that and we haven't regretted those decisions that we made, to make that step change. So be bold. It is a cultural change. So you need to support your staff, but you also need to kind of be clear that it's not optional. We were kind of clear that we were moving to Google Classroom, and actually it wasn't sort of optional. Sounds a bit harsh, but it's just about setting that sort of mentality through the organisation. This is the direction of travel. This is where we're going to end up, and just kind of sticking to that and not allowing people to not come on board with it and not kind of get on the bus. Because, the real benefits of things like Google Classroom for a team of teachers is that ability to share, and that ability to kind of share their work, the ability for someone to, if necessary, come in and pick up a class at short notice using the resources that are already there on the classroom, without someone having kept that in their own little folder or, their own kind of bit of the IT system that no one else has access to. Really facilitates that sharing and that practice of team working across an organisation, and everyone benefits from that. You can't have people kind of, just kind of wanting to be precious about resources. You've got to be prepared to share it, and that's kind of a really important thing. It does need investment, but you can look at what systems you don't need, and that's also the kind of slightly ruthless bit. So a lot of organisations tend to end up with paying for lots of little bits of software, little bits here and there that maybe only one person uses or one team uses. And really, you can't do that. You need to free up your resources to make the bigger investments. So, it's about everyone using the kind of consistent same systems and trying to get rid of the kind of, we had, when we set up our group to start with, we had a bit of a thing about, no more spreadsheets. Didn't want anyone keeping little bits of data and information on lots of different systems that other people couldn't access. So that was a big part of the kind of lessons, I think, for us. And actually we found we could reinvest quite a bit, because there were lots of things that actually we said, you know what, we can just not pay for that anymore, and we can reinvest that money in other things. And obviously we invest far less in things like desktop PCs now and far more in mobile devices. So the balance of our capital investment has completely changed as well. So it doesn't have to be about spending more. It can be about spending some of that money better. And, I guess it's a bit of a cliche, but it's for the organisation, it's all about technology. It's not about IT. And making that step change was also just one of those really important things. Sorry, that was probably more than 3, Wayne.
No, that was absolutely fine. And I think you're very right in saying that you do need to consolidate all of those disparate IT systems that you have and invest in something that 80-90% of your staff and students are going to be using. Otherwise, it's too disjointed. And that's something that we're seeing in some of the schools and colleges that we're working with through the EdTech Demonstrator project, is that they don't have a real idea of what they're using, where and why. And I think that's something that we do have here at the college. We know what we're using and we know why we're using it. So thank you very much, Kate.
No problem.
Any questions from anybody outside? Okay.
No, that was very useful. Thank you very much.
No, thanks, Jane.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. We've got 2 more sessions coming up. We've got one next Wednesday, which is going paperless with G Suite and Teams. So although we are a Google college, we also use Teams in various areas of the college. So we are quite experienced with that as well. And then the following week on the 30th, we're doing G Suite and Teams Smackdown, where we're comparing Google Classroom and Microsoft Teams and having the features between each. It's unbiased, even though we're running it. And I think it will help you to decide which platform might be best for your situation. If you would like help from the EdTech Demonstrator colleges, schools and colleges, that's the email address that you need to follow there. And I'll follow this up with an email to everybody with that link. My email address is waynehall@darlington.ac.uk or Wayne G. Hall on Twitter if you'd like to get in touch with me directly. And finally, I'd just like to say thank you very much to our panel, who've been absolutely brilliant. I know it's been a very busy time this past fortnight with students coming back into college. And I'd just like to thank them for taking the time out to prepare for this and actually to run the webinar with me. So thank you very much, Kate, Carol and Mike. Thanks for your time.
No,
Thank you, Wayne, for facilitating it.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. This will be on YouTube tomorrow.
Bye all.
Bye.
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 I'll just stop recording.